Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Trek, the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on Volume 14, Chapter 4. And again, I'm sorry about last week. I know, I felt bad the whole week. Like, I'm only doing one chapter. I keep telling myself, look, it's a long chapter. Chapter 3 was a long chapter. I didn't want to kill myself. But at the same time, it's like, gosh dang, it does suck. I don't want to move down to one chapter per volume or per Mushoku Mondays, but at the same time, I have to understand that I can't push myself too hard, and if something is that long, it's that long. I can make an argument. I always criticize myself. I just want people to know that. Not unhealthy but I do like to criticize myself to keep myself getting better and getting better. I've heard a lot of feedback of people saying, it's getting better, and it's a good thing. I'm glad that it's kind of showing, that effort is actually showing, but maybe it's an aspect of trying to condense a little more or something like that, but again, it always comes down to that balance, and in the end, we had one chapter, and I'm sorry, hopefully this episode we get Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 at least, but we'll see. But again, I'm sorry that we only got one chapter, but it is what it is. Let's move on to it, but as per usual, greatly appreciate you guys' support, all the support that you guys give me through just kind words, through super chats, super thanks, memberships, Patreon supporters, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. I really, really, really appreciate it. And additionally, yes, all the massive growth that we've had over the last, 5 weeks or so for Mushoku Tensei's anime, let's be perfectly clear. But a lot of great stuff coming out of that, but really greatly appreciate it. But with that said, let's jump into it. But first, before I get in Chapter 4, I do want to go back and a couple things that kind of popped in my head while I was editing, because that happens sometimes. Something that really didn't dawn on me while I was doing my recording was, yes, in fact, the idea of the whole thing with her paying for people to sleep with her technically makes sense now, because yes, by somebody sleeping with her, she's making a lot of money from a gym, so it makes sense that she's wanting to give part of that to the person that is supplying it. I don't think she has to. She doesn't have to explain that to them, but at the same time, it is kind of a cool aspect to think about that, yes, Rudius at the time believed that she was paying people in order to avoid conflict, which still could be a thing. She could be doing that in order to pretty much appease the other party, despite the fact that most people that sleep with her are perfectly fine with just the fact of sleeping with her. It is kind of an interesting thing to note that she's going out of her way to pay them for that like it's a transaction. And again, that could be an element to kind of distance herself from them. I paid for this. This isn't romance or anything. Don't get connected to me. Maybe that is an element of trying to create that disconnect. But at the same time, it is a cool thing to the favor of her character, because as a society, there's a lot of people that would see what Ellen Lisa is doing and see it as dirty and wrong. I didn't really see it that way. I just assume, okay, she's a super thirsty person. I don't really care. Like, it doesn't bother me, but at the same time, it doesn't make her appealing to me in any way. But there is that element of, yes, I do technically see that this kind of bumps her up morally to a lot of people, because she's giving a part of that transaction to somebody else. She's gaining not only a suppression of her curse, not only being able to live, but additionally, she's gaining fortune. And so she's giving that to the other person, because technically they are a part of her gaining that fortune. It is kind of a cool thing when she doesn't necessarily have to say that, and they would never know. But I think it's really cool. But additionally, it also kind of explains that whole aspect of, because she said to Cliff all this information, because Rudius asked, does Cliff know about this? And she's like, yes, I told Cliff everything before the wedding. It is pretty much her saying, this is my entire story. Like, I'd assume that she sat Cliff down and said, I need you to know all this. Like she told Rudius, I hope that when you hear these rumors about this, you don't think badly of Sylphie. It is this idea that you're going to hear rumors. And she's going to assume that Cliff, one day, he's going to hear rumors that I used to basically sell myself out. It would be interesting for her to say that time, or it would make sense for her to say that at that time. Why this is interesting is because what happened for the whole wedding? Cliff covered everything. He bought the house and everything. So if we were to assume that she told him all that before then, it might be an aspect that he doesn't want to use her money, because her money is a product of the curse. And so him using, even though she has a fortune, probably, she has a lot of money, she can just go out and sell one of these gems and probably get a house or something. I'm not sure if it's that worth that much, but she has a lot of value. But that value that she's using is a product of the curse that he's trying to get rid of. And so it makes sense that he wouldn't want to use that. I think there's a pride aspect to it as well. I'm not discounting that. He's for sure wanting to pay for it all himself because it's a pride thing. But I think by now we can probably establish this idea that he's not that prideful. He has come down quite a few pegs. He still slips up. He still acts prideful. But even with Chapter 5, we see a lot of that Cliff where his pride isn't really getting in the way. Even in Chapter 4, it's not his pride that gets him standing up. What's making him stand up is his own morality, his own beliefs. And I think that it's been a while since we've had a true prideful experience from Cliff, where he just sounds out of his line. Like he's out of line in how he's talking. I think for that situation, it's because he didn't want to use what is ailing her. I'm trying to get rid of that. I don't want to use that. I can get a massive house probably with all those those baby gems, but I'm not going to do that. But it's cool. It's a cool thought though. But yes, with out of the way, and yes, I kind of in my own head. I don't know if I mentioned in the last Mushoku Monday. I did want to go sit down and spend more time on the whole prophecy wall thing, but I ultimately decided that I don't want to. Like I said in last Mushoku Monday, I don't like prophecies. Not that I'm mad at Refugin for doing it and that it's wrong for him to do it, because I'm sure he's going to do something really cool with it. I don't like prophecies, and I hate reading into them because sometimes they can spell too much. Again, I think that he did a good job of being vague, because without me really kind of deep diving it, I don't think I'm going to get too much out of it. But at the same time, I don't want to stick on it, because sometimes it can spell out too much, and I'm really afraid of that. And so I'm probably going to leave it, like I said, I'm probably just going to leave it and document on the side, but I don't think that I want to spend too much time digging into it unless there's something that's critically missing if I don't dig into it, which my trusted mods will let me know. And I doubt they're going to say anything. With that said, let's finally, 7 minutes into the recording, let's jump into Chapter 4, Lament. 3 days passed since Nanahoshi collapsed. She hadn't regained her consciousness, and they didn't know what was cause for her to throw up blood. Aramonfi had appeared, see, as I mentioned before, I would scream out Aramonfi, Aramonfi, and he would just show up and then say, where do we go? Yes, Aramonfi had appeared right after Sylphie left to get help, taking her to the sickbay. In the meantime, he gathered everyone and explained the situation. At the moment, Yuzuru... I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen. I literally told the mods, too, that I hate this name. Yuruzu. I'm going to say Yuzuru. I think there's a character that I know of that is Yuzuru, and that's why it's throwing me off so much, but I'm going to keep saying Yuzuru. I know it. Yuruzu of the Atonement was looking after her. She had a special healing power that allowed her to transfer one person's stamina and health to another person. Since it operated differently than toxification magic, it could be effective in treating an illness that couldn't be cured through normal means. Still, Yuruzu needed somebody to cooperate to perform it. Sylphie immediately volunteered. And here's a saving aspect for Sylphie right here. Now, again, I don't necessarily believe that Sylphie attacked Nanahoshi. I never really kind of imagined her to go that direction, because again, like I said before, there's so many cases where she could have done the same exact thing, and granted, I feel that Nanahoshi is much more different for her because she gets stuck on Nanahoshi. She always brings up Nanahoshi. So I do believe, deep down, for Sylphie, there is an uncertainty around Nanahoshi. Because again, she doesn't know where Nanahoshi come from, and I think she's piecing it together. I think she said that she asked Nanahoshi, are you from another world? She's piecing it all together, but the problem is piecing it together with Rudius. So I do believe that, yes, in fact, Nanahoshi can be something that's triggering more jealousy out of Sylphie, but I don't think she would ever go this far. Now, even though it's funny to joke about. It's funny to joke about because, again, for those who have not watched the Mushoku Mondays for a long time, yes, I made a theory that Sylphie is the yandere archetype broken. Because Refugin likes to implement archetypes and then break them. Again, Edis. Edis is a archetype tsundere, and he has broke that. Even Rudius himself says, a tsundere. So yes, it does kind of play into my theory there, but I don't think that was the case. And again, they're kind of going to explain it more in detail right here in a minute, that it was more an aspect of pouring in mana, which, yes, technically does imply Sylphie, Rudius, Cliff, everybody that's been healing her with toxification has been fueling her with mana that's not filtered. And that could have been actually harming her. Anyways, I'm getting back in that discussion. Moving on. But the fact of Sylphie stepping up and volunteering, especially with how they show what it does to a person, does technically give credit to not only that she didn't do it, but additionally how this is affecting her. She doesn't want this to be a thing. Now, I'd be curious to get into great detail eventually what drives Sylphie to do this. If there could be an aspect of what is the driving force for Sylphie to step up? There's obvious conclusions that you can make, but I always love hearing it from the character themselves. There's two elements that could be driving her to step up. One is the aspect of crap. I don't want people to believe that I did this. Not that I necessarily love or like Nanahoshi. Or could it be an aspect that, yes, I truly do care for Nanahoshi and I want her to be safe. I will do whatever I can. I'm going to step up. These are very two distinct ideas here that, yes, do overlap, but it is a good question mark. And I know that bugs some people for me to question Sylphie's driving force, but I like to do that. Characters are fun to study. Karawante, how is she? The man at his command was Karawante of Insight, whose ability allowed him to peer through the unknown, to identify a person's secrets. This also meant they can analyze a person's condition if they were unwell, almost like an X-ray vision. It's not something that Yuruzu can cure with her powers. Then search the archives. As you command. Karawante would search the literature of the fortress for the symptoms that he observed. Rudius offered his help, but Pedagog turned him down. He's like, no, stay away from my books. He had no intentions of letting any outsiders in his archives. This left Rudius with nothing to do but keep himself preoccupied. He didn't spend the next 3 days doing nothing. He returned home and updated Roxy on the situation, letting her know that Nanahoshi had collapsed and that Sylphie was helping to treat her. Thus, he said they would be a little bit delayed getting back. Roxy immediately took action, contacting the university for time off, then explained to everyone in their family in his stead. She also said that she would take care of everyone while they were gone. She was far more calm and collected than he was. No doubt, she was used to this kind of situation. That kind of makes me wonder, yes, technically, living out in the Demon Continent, yes, it's a lot more of a harsh environment, so yeah, they could possibly deal with these types of situations often, people just being taken out randomly. More prone to traumatic events and being able to handle them a little better. Plus, yes, all of her experience through adventuring and stuff like that. In the end, he didn't do anything. Instead, Roxy did it all in his stead. All he did was remind Aisha and Norn that he would be late coming back, then grabbed an extra change of clothes and went back to the fortress. There wasn't anything that he could do when he got back besides pray for Nanahoshi to come out of this safely. This is kind of one of those sad things. It's sort of mirroring that aspect of, yeah, somebody being taken to the hospital. Again, everything's going fine. You're having a teasing session with your wife, and then suddenly somebody just coughs out blood. You're taking them to the hospital, and then you're staying there for a little bit. You're staying outside the door, waiting to see what kind of results will come out. And then you go back home, you get a change of clothes, then you go back to the hospital, and you're just waiting. It's like your life, traumatic experiences like this and critical moments like this of people's lives, it's just your life comes to a stop. I even had that situation with my father as well. Obviously, this idea that the moment it happens, you get that call and it feels like everything just comes to a stop. You don't even want to, even if you do decide to go to work just to keep yourself preoccupied, it's just like it feels like your life just comes to a stop. You don't even think about the future. Your mind's not even in the future. Your mind is just what is going to happen in a couple minutes, because you don't want to set your future. You're not thinking forward because you never know what's going to come from the results, because the results could just completely just shatter whatever you're planning. So it literally feels like before the incident, you have all these things planned out. I'm going to do this next week. I'm planning on probably in about 3 weeks, we're probably going to go do this event. Also, I'm looking forward to this. Oh yeah, that show's coming on late next week. You're planning everything out. Your mind is forward thinking. The moment that this occurrence happens, it's like you just take an eraser to it, because you're like, I don't even know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do all this stuff, because right now, this means everything to me. What happens to my loved one is all that matters at the moment. Stop it, Andrew. Stop it, Andrew. Anyways, moving on before I start doing that. Cliff spoke up. I wonder if she'll recover. Cliff had nothing to do either. The castle had a chapel, which is kind of surprising to me. And that's where Cliff offered his fervent prayers. Let thy will be done, Lord Millis, he said, his hands clasped together and his eyes closed. People of faith prayed in troubling times. Rudius, on the other hand, never believed in any sort of higher power. Yes, you do. You believe in Roxy. I know what he's implying here. It's like he does I do believe. I don't know if he's ever done this before, actually. That's a good question mark. I do understand that he does separate what he's talking about here from, yes, his religion of Roxy. What he's establishing here is, yes, I've never believed in, like, what my old world would believe as a god or whatever. He only put faith in the people who helped him out in this world. Again, Roxy, Sylphie. And he knew that even if he prayed to Roxy or Sylphie, it wouldn't relieve the anxiety he felt. That's a very interesting little note there. And again, this kind of goes back and forth in that whole idea of what is a joke and what isn't. Rudius obviously very much so believes in this idea of Roxy, his goddess, the divine spirit of Sylphie. This idea that he puts these beings above, that they're like his goddesses. Now, right here, he's specifically saying, even if I pray to them, it's not going to help my anxiety. He doesn't say that praying to Roxy and Sylphie is not going to be some sort of power, but it does show that he has that disconnect. I'm not going to pray to them. It's not like they're going to solve this. It's a very interesting thing. In silence, Rudius remembered an alien movie in his past world. They overpowered mankind before dying to a common cold in the end. Nanahoshi got teleported to this world, and wasn't reincarnated like Rudius was, not aging or being able to use magic or magical implements. Perhaps it wasn't simply mana that she lacked, but immunity to pathogens of this world. And this is where it gets into that, which, yes, was kind of my theory there. That something that is normally bred into people through generations of this immunity that they built up is not going to exist for her. It's sort of like that whole aspect of the flu or the common cold or something like that we experience every single year that builds up our immune system, and then having something just kind of thrown into this world that doesn't have those cells built up with strength, the cells don't know how to handle what they're seeing. They don't recognize it. Normally, your cells that fight those things know what it is and know how to attack it. Where if they don't know, then they're just going to go, oh, there's another cell. What's up, dude? But it's different than that, obviously. If that was the case, then she would fall ill sooner, which, yes, makes sense. She had been here for 8 years since the displacement incident. That was a long time for her to go unaffected. She did say that she took care of herself. His lips thinned. Is she actually going to die? Cutting to the 4th day since Nanahoshi collapsed, they were called to a room with a round table. Pedagogus and his familiars present. Except I hate this name so much. It's going to be so... I'm just going to laugh about it. I could probably cut it, but I'm just going to laugh about it every time. Except Yuruzu of Atonement and Sylphie, who was still with Nanahoshi. Silvarl spoke up. We have discovered what ails Lady Nanahoshi. The name of her illness is Drying Syndrome. Reese hadn't heard that. Even Cliff, who was the most knowledgeable of them about medical stuff, didn't even know either. It's not surprising that you are unfamiliar with it. It was active eons ago, when humans possessed less mana than they do today. Back then, a number of children were born without any mana at all. By the time they reached 10 years of age, without exception, they would die from the syndrome. That matched up with Nanahoshi. Although she wasn't 10 years old, she had been in this world for 8 years, and she possessed no mana. So her illness definitely wasn't... I like this. I like that. Again, I do appreciate that Rudius does acknowledge this stuff. So her illness definitely wasn't Sylphie's fault after all. That means he still had it in the back of his head. There's a possibility. But there's also that aspect of trying to hope that he can find some sort of evidence that says, if anybody says it's her fault, I have this to say it. It could be an aspect he's looking for defensive mechanisms. According to literature, those that don't possess mana of their own lack the ability to neutralize outside mana that filters in. Thus it accumulates inside of them over a decade and causes this illness. Reese didn't quite understand what that meant. It did sound similar to good bacteria and bad bacteria. Having your own mana meant having good bacteria fleshing out the bad, but those that didn't have any would build up bad bacteria instead. Yeah, that's sort of where, again, I was kind of equating it to earlier, that just having this ability to fight bad, cells and stuff inside of your body, infections and illnesses. And I think that kind of equates it to it in the idea of calling it a filtering process, something that filters it. But again, having somebody... And that's, again, where I'm starting to question that idea of them technically making the problem worse. Yes, the symptoms were there, and that's why they were doing detoxification. So there was a reason why they were casting detoxification out. It's not like they were just going, oh, let's pour mana into you today. It's this idea that, yes, it started to show because she was probably getting mana from around her, possibly through the process of them doing all those researches with the circles. Maybe she was getting some of that mana from the process. Or it could be from the ring and stuff, the magical implements that she wore, or the magical items. It's not magical implements, because then magical implements would require mana. It's magical items. Stuff is throwing mana into her body over time, and because she doesn't have any way of pushing that out or filtering that mana, it's just building up. And then the symptoms start, and then she asks for detoxification. And detoxification is a healing magic, which Rudius has described as the idea of pouring your mana into somebody. When he's talking about the teleportation and stuff, he's like, but you can't, summon things to go through objects. But, he said, but healing's different. When I heal something, I'm having to touch it so I can pour mana into it. And so you can see that being something that's going to cause it to get worse and worse. Which is interesting that they bring in this individual that is essentially transferring stamina and health. Because that could possibly be not necessarily pouring mana into somebody. Which is very interesting. I'd be curious if at some point they do describe how that process actually works. Now, yes, I will admit, this sort of puts a little bit of a wrench into my theory in this idea of Nanahoshi possibly being a sort of a vessel for something. Like, she came to this world as a vessel. There's got to be a reason why her body was brought to this world. Again, it could just be a casualty of other things that were happening. I mean, it could be possibly that somebody's intention was to summon somebody in that street that day, or that sidewalk or whatever, whether it be Rudius, possibly one of the other boys, or Nanahoshi, and then she got dragged into it, and just maybe the other two souls required her to be sort of a vessel, physical vessel, to bring it over, and then thus she's just discarded. She had her use. She's just a shell that we needed. We don't need her anymore. That's why she's just wandering around the world, and nothing's really messing with her attempts to go back. But I still had that kind of theory in there, the idea of her herself being a vessel for something. Maybe her physical body was brought there because something needs to be put in it. Often in cases, vessels are brought into these stories, and the idea that something elsewhere doesn't have a body, and so they need this vessel so they can come into it eventually and push her soul out or whatever. So yeah, I did have a thought of maybe her getting sick, or eventually right now, that finally coming to be. Like, now that soul needs to come out so that the true soul, Laplace or whatever, can go inside of her. And so this is her physically dying so that her soul leaves, and then something can go inside there. Or that something that is going to take over her body being inside of her, incubating, waiting for that day that it finally bursts out. And that could be possibly that aspect of her not allowing mana to come in. So that whole moment when Sylphie was first saying, oh, my mana's not going in there, something's happening, it's coalescing, it's not doing like it's normally doing, that's where I was thinking maybe that mana's coming in from the detoxification spell, and it's being caught by that thing that's inside of her, that soul or whatever inside of her. But again, they're sort of seemingly saying all these things are pointing towards this illness that, yes, makes sense to everything they've kind of laid out before then. So it sort of kills my theory. Not that it can't still be the case. Maybe the person that brought her here to be a vessel knew that she'd eventually get sick, but then maybe somebody will fix it. Somebody that knew that they'll find a resolve for it. We'll see. We'll see. Rudy spoke up. Did you find anything about how to cure the illness? There was nothing. This took place 7,000 years ago. As humans' natural mana strengthened over time, the syndrome died out. That meant it wasn't active prior to the first great human-demon war. That war lasted over a millennium. Such vast conflict brought great evolution. However they did it, mankind managed to strengthen themselves. It made sense that Dryne syndrome died off as a byproduct. 7,000 years was a long time. It wasn't surprised that there was such little literature left on the topic. It was a miracle that they even managed to find a name for what was ailing her. So what do we do now? Freeze her in time. Scarecrow of Time can use his power to freeze Nanahoshi's clock. A man with a mask that protruded at the mouth stepped forward. It reminded Rudius of a Hyotoko mask. Or maybe a gas mask. I was like, okay, that is like two different types of mask here. Rudius recalled his ability was to freeze time of anyone that he touched. It would stop his time as well, but if used on her, it could keep her from dying or getting worse. That makes me wonder, like, how do you know when to stop it? Like, if you touch somebody and time freezes for you as well, how do you know when to not? Like, is he gonna, like, stop her time and then just, like, I don't know, somebody has to kick him over and make him not touch anymore? I'd imagine that would actually work. All right, what do we do after that? We contact people on the surface and find a way to cure it. Although I have no idea how many people out there will want to try to save her. Can't you just use your influence to help her? Nanahoshi and I are merely bound by contract. I won't put myself in debt to other people to help her. That sounded cold, but Rudius didn't know anything about the relationship, and he wasn't about to stick his nose into where it didn't belong. Don't misunderstand me. You are my guest, so I'll do what I can to help. However, my entire life's purpose is to seek out Laplace and vanquish him. What aid I can offer only extends so far. I can assist her at the cost of my own objective. Since watching over Laplace was his job, he wouldn't put any extra effort to help. Helping out someone would put a debt that he would have to repay. Considering the syndrome had been long gone, that would be a heavy debt. Pedagoose had no obligation to help someone like Nanahoshi. No, he'd already done more than what he was duty-bound to do. He treated her condition and kept her alive. That was why he was making this decision, that he wouldn't do more than he'd already done. He had to take action, and there was nothing wrong with this. Again, I know this is like a broken record right here. I always appreciate that Rudius is willing to say they had their reasons. He has his reasons. There's a reason for this. Yes, technically, if he does go out of his way in order to cure this illness, he's basically putting himself in debt to other people for saving a life. And that is a massive debt. Yes, you can say that he's technically doesn't have much of debt because he's having one person help another person, but no, he's in the middle. He's using his power, his influence to pull somebody into the picture that is going to he's now going to owe. And yes, when his focus is this one thing, he can't take his focus off of it. That's the important thing. Laplace is dangerous to him. He wants to make sure Laplace does not break out. And when he does find him, he vanquishes him. His fear is, where is Laplace going to pop up? How is he going to get unsealed? Where would he get unsealed? Where is he at? And if he has anything distracting him, somebody has a debt that he owes, a severe debt, he's going to take his eyes off for a minute. And he's going to be focusing on that. And that can't happen. But there could be another aspect here of, you guys, fix your own problems. This isn't my problem. Fix your own problems. Step up. I think there could be a side of this of him just wanting them to step up. And it kind of sort of hints later on, if I remember correctly, that it's sort of him going, Rudius, let's see what you do. And then finally, Cliff spoke up in the presence of Pedagoose. Oh, when I read this line, I'm like, Cliff? Whoa, what, Cliff? Cliff speaking up? Cliff's such a good boy. Cliff spoke up. You're just planning on abandoning Nanahoshi then? He sprung to his feet. I never said I would abandon her. Liar, you have this incredible castle and all of these exceptional familiars at your disposal. If anyone could search for a cure, you should be able to. Pedagoose's brow twitched. Having the ability to do something does not mean one is obligated to do it. Enough of your games. It's the duty of those with power to help those in need. Don't push Millicent's annoying religious drivel on me. What did you say? Rudius knew Cliff was speaking out of anger. I hope I didn't bust this microphone yelling. I want to put some passion into it. Cliff was a believer in Millis, which resembled Christianity. Perhaps one of their teaching was that people should extend their hand of mercy to those lambs that need succor. While a mistake to say that to Pedagoose, he was operating on his own sense of morality. For the past 400 years, Pedagoose has been working towards one objective. He was interested in Nanahoshi's research, but that didn't take priority over Laplace. It was mostly a way of killing time. And I do believe that is an aspect of him being interested in that. This is, again, what he's kind of noted, this idea that we dragon folk love this kind of stuff. What you're saying is tantamount to abandoning Nanahoshi. If you're going to help her, you should commit to doing it right. Cliff, enough, Eloise bellowed at him. She seized him by the shoulders and held him tight, so he couldn't move. I know how you feel, but hold it in. His lips drew taut. I don't want to lose you over something like this. Gosh. Ugh. She's afraid of Pedagoose. I mean, Cliff, everybody in the room should be, but at the same time, she's afraid of losing him. All 11 of Pedagoose's familiars were poised for battle. Pedagoose took one glance to Cliff, who was comparatively powerless, and his lips curled into a mocking smile. It's that aspect of, like, Cliff, first time he speaks up in front of Pedagoose, says a whole bunch of things. Again, this is what Ellen Lace warned him. Ellen Lace told him if they say something insulting, don't say anything. Just keep quiet. She didn't want something like this happen. She knows that Cliff will blow up. This is finally that sign of essentially what she was warning. And this happens. He blows up at Pedagoose, and he's yelling at Pedagoose. And at some point, Ellen Lace says, stop. And around him, all the familiars are ready. It's like that realization point. Oh, crap. And then in the middle of it, Pedagoose is like, right, dude. He decides to have a mocking smile. If you're so bothered over her condition, why don't you take action? Your God would say the same. Would he not? When helping those in need, don't rely on others, I believe it was. He's gonna throw his scripture right back at his face. Cliff scowled as he slid back down, vexed by Pedagoose's words. He probably had no intentions of attacking Pedagoose. He was simply upset at someone so powerful and capable of anything not wanting to help. That there is an element of that. They're both not wrong here. It's like that aspect that Cliff is not wrong for being upset here because he sees somebody that has everything. You could fix this. You have every tool. You have this wall behind you and it's covered with everything. The thing to help Nanahoshi, the thing to cure her, the thing to get contacts with people. You have teleportation circles. Everything's on this wall and you won't do anything. So he's right to be angry. At the same time, equally, Pedagoose is right. Why are you yelling at me? You go do it. Why are you just standing there yelling at me? This is a problem that we honestly have as a society, that we do that a lot too. And I'm guilty of doing it as well in the past. So I'm not going to say myself, I'm some holier than thou type of argument here. I'll just put myself into it. I've had times where I go, why don't they do something about this? Well, I'm sitting there doing nothing. We have a habit of that. Why won't you do something? Do it yourself. It again goes back to what I was saying before with that whole extra chapter with Norn and Cliff, is that idea that even if you don't believe in something of like a scripture or something like that, you can still acknowledge the knowledge within it. There's certain quotes and stuff in a lot of books, even if it's not religious books, of this knowledge that somebody has gained that is such truthful words. Do not rely on others when you could do it yourself. You're going to spend too much time waiting for somebody else that you could have stepped in and done something. It is kind of like that whole sad thing that you see often online where, you know, you have a person being robbed or somebody's being harmed. Let's say this guy is just beating on this old lady as she was walking down this sidewalk, and then you have all these people with their phones holding up, and they're all going, "Man, somebody do something!" And you even have the person recordings over there going, "Oh my gosh, I wish somebody would do something. Somebody call somebody." It's so dumb that we do that. Anyways, I need to move on. Rudius began to think about what to do. He had no idea where to start. The rest of the group seemed stumped as well. Rudius didn't like this whole thing. Aisha, who had spent a lot of time with Nanahoshi, would be saddened by her loss. Plus, Sylphie might blame herself. As he thought, Yuruzu entered the room. "Pardon me, Lady Nanahoshi has regained consciousness." Rudius leapt from his chair. "And how is she?" "On the surface, her symptoms seem to have improved." "Meaning?" "Drying syndrome caused a buildup of mana, which altered one's body and led to the illness. We have managed to treat the symptoms." Reese thought that Drying syndrome resembled AIDS. The detoxification magic was clearing up the symptoms, but not ridding the problem. "Can't you absorb the mana from her body or something?" "I'm not able to do that, no." "Then don't you know anyone that can?" Yuruzu slowly shook her head. "Oh, all right then." Yeah, that was kind of a mindset that I had there, is the possibility if it's just the unfiltered mana coming in there. If her original state, her original healthy point was mana 0, pull it all out of her. Take out all that mana. But again, that's also kind of assuming she has 0 mana. And yes, we keep implying this idea that she's never had mana when she came here. She came as a human, transported straight to this world, so she never had a mana capacity. But there could be something there, some sort of mana itself that's there. Because over time, over the period of time of this series, I've got this hint that there is different states of mana. That's the whole idea of having a cursed child or a blessed child, is a disruption of that mana, a changing of, a warping of it. So it makes sense that there's different states of mana. Regis wondered if he could make a magical implement that could draw out the mana. Maybe use the mana absorption stone. No, that couldn't absorb the mana inside of a person's body. But again, that also, it goes counter to what he was talking about with the mana absorption stone. And again, this is kind of another one of those problems of Rudius. What are you talking about? That doesn't work like that. You've already established that. But again, that's his research, his belief of how it works. When Rudius was looking at the magic absorption stones, what he felt it was doing was not that it was absorbing mana directly into it, because like he's holding on to it, it's not pulling mana into there. It was more that it was, the way that he was describing it kind of sounded like this idea that it was similar to Disturbed Magic, but not the same as Disturbed Magic. Disturbed Magic, you're disrupting the flow of mana to create a spell. Whereas the mana stones themselves, or the mana absorption stones, what they were doing was, what he was saying was it was sort of creating a similar spell, or it was casting a spell to obliterate it. Almost like this idea of creating something that can negate it. It's an easy example, but the idea of like casting water at a fire spell to fizzle it out, but not necessarily casting it. Anyways, so it's not pulling the mana is the main key thing there, because it was drawing mana from his hand, so it's casting a spell, but it's not returning it back to him. But again, no, that couldn't absorb what was inside a person's body, though it might not be impossible to use that way. And I technically do acknowledge that if it was possible that it would kind of cast a spell inside of her and obliterate that mana. But what damage would that do is my thought process. Maybe make something instead. But how long would that take? Reis decided to leave the meeting and check on Nanahoshi. The rest of the others quickly followed behind. In the sickbay, it was a desolate room, similar furniture as the guest rooms, but the interior was made of windowless stone. Nanahoshi was in her bed in the corner. All the blood that she had hacked up was gone. While no signs externally that she was in danger, life seemed to have been drained from her. "Nanahoshi, are you okay?" She glanced at Rudius. "Do I look okay to you?" Nope. She was deathly pale. Dark bags under her eyes. Perhaps Yuruzu's power of atonement were draining for the patient. Sylphie wasn't in the room, as Yuruzu had her carried back to her guest room. In passing, Rudius seen her, and she looked emaciated. She had been helping out with Nanahoshi's treatment for the last 4 days, and it seemed to have had a noticeable impact on her constitution. "Yuruzu said that they can't cure me." "I know. Well, I'm sure you'll get better soon, though." "We both know that I won't." Her gaze turned to the wall, and she went quiet. Perhaps that was reckless to say. After a long silence, Ariel and the others try to comfort her, encourage her. They were all just trying to brighten up their mood. But unfortunately, in times like this, sometimes it has the opposite effect. Again, this is kind of going back to what Ruiz has really got into several times before, this idea of trying to say things like, it's going to get better, or I know what you're going through. These are all things that just don't quite have what you think they're going to imply to somebody when they're in this state. This is a moment right here, Nanahoshi, in this moment, when she heard, they can't cure me. She said, Rudy is kind of in notes right here. Wow. So they're perfectly honest with her. They didn't sugarcoat it. There's a lot of groups, a lot of people that will try to kind of dance around the truth, and you have to kind of push them. Just give me the truth. You're going to die. Can't even imagine that. It's haunting. I mean, I thankfully have not experienced that, somebody telling me you're going to die, but I've experienced it through other people. Some people saying, yeah, months, even a month, 3 weeks. It's like you have this timer on you now. It's like, wow, how am I supposed to be happy when there's literally a timer on me that says 15 hours? How am I supposed to be happy? You're going to get better. We're going to do something. It's still right here. Your words aren't getting rid of this expiration tag on me. Cut this off and we'll be happy, all right? It sucks. Like, how do you encourage somebody in that situation? Sometimes it's like, I can't even say, like, just be there and stuff like that. It sucks. I think everybody handles it differently. And through my situations with stuff like that, it's like, there's never a commonality between them. For those in pain, this was nothing but empty reassurance. After some time and another silence, Ariel spoke up. Well, then Nanahoshi, I should be getting back to my room. I'll come back and see you again. She was the first to leave, and the others followed. Cliff lingered, but Elise finally got him to leave. I like how Cliff is such a good boy. Now, I'm not saying that the others for leaving are bad, but it's just kind of, again, it's one of those little bit of signs. Obviously, Refugin, through Rudius, is going out of his way to show this is something that Cliff does not like. He's lingering, and Elise has to pull him out. We need to go. Elise finally got him to leave. There's no words that we can offer her, Rudius heard Elise say as they shut the door. Rudius was the only one left. This is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt so bad. I don't know how much of it I'm gonna read out loud. Rudius was the only one left, not knowing why he stayed. He felt that he needed to stay where he felt that he needed to stay with her. I'm already getting worked up, but I'm not even to the part yet. I'm just remembering things. That it would be dangerous to leave her alone right now. Again, this goes right back to when she had her big failure. Like, this was it for her. She was in a bad state. Something in a situation where somebody should not be alone. It would be dangerous to leave her alone right now. There was nothing he could say to her. Anything he said would be pointless. Nahoshi had to be filled with anxiety, with an incurable illness. Her research was heading in the right direction. Judging by what Petagus said, she had all that she needed to move on to the next step. Reese had no idea how close she was to the 5th stage, but if she kept things up, she could probably go home in another year or two. That's another thing that, no matter what, a death sentence still sucks. But it more sucks than the idea that I'm almost there. Like, just give me another year, and I can get out of here. But no, I'm at a point now where I'm going to, like, it's literally, she's been spending 8 years getting to this point where she can go back home, and the goalpost is right here. And then suddenly this says, nope, you can't make it more than this many feet. I can't, like, it's right there, and I can't get to it. I'm going to die before I get to it. It sucks. Just as things were looking up, this happened. It was like a cancer diagnosis. Even though cancer was no longer considered untreatable in the old world, the death rates were still quite high. It was enough to drive her into a corner filled with despair. She could snap again. If there was no cure, she had no future waiting for her. If she couldn't return home, she had every right to go berserk. Perhaps if she unleashed her fury until nothing was left, she could settle down and find some way to enjoy what time she had left. He'd stick by her if she decided to cut loose. I like that. This idea, I mean, it's technically like this imagination of, like, just let it out. Let her just trash everything. Let's go back to her research lab. Let her trash the whole thing, and then we'll just sit down and we'll just watch the sunset until it's over. And it's honestly one of those sad realization points of that idea of, again, you get a diagnosis like this, and it's like, I have all this stuff I had planned is gone because I'm only going to last to, like, this point right here. Damn it. So I need to reevaluate what I'll do at that time. And it is a sucky thing to tell somebody. Like, just focus on right here. because this is all we have left to just make it as good as possible. I've never had a strong body to begin with, you know. Nanahoshi sighed. Her voice sounded more cheerful than expected, but it was empty and sincere. I wouldn't really say that I'm the sickly type, but I did catch a cold once every year. Reese kept quiet and listened as words poured out of her. Fudge, I'm not even at the bad parts yet. Damn it. My grades were good, but I wasn't really athletic. I preferred being indoors, which we kind of got an indication of that because she made a lot of reference and comments about like light novels and manga and stuff like that. So she seemed like she was at least into literature and stuff. After a brief pause, she changed subjects. This world hasn't made much progress in medical front, has it? Maybe it's because they are so reliant on magic in this world. Did you know that people of this world don't even wash their wounds after they get injured? As a result, there are so many who receive treatment too late and die and lose limbs. Idiots, aren't they? Even just cleaning their wounds with ordinary water would prevent such an infection from ever happening. It's kind of like she's just kind of jumping around in thought right here. But yes, it does technically make sense that she's sitting in this room where she's got this illness and the only treatment they really have is people casting a spell inside of her, which didn't work. And then having them do this transfer thing, which didn't work. And it's this anger that the medical treatments in this world aren't enough. And at the same time, she's also equating it to other people that they don't have treatments either. Because this world isn't that advanced. And again, it's that shifting. She's segueing into different conversations here. And at this point, it's segueing into the idea of that reliance. And additionally, how much she doesn't like this world. Rias waited in silence again. Ever since I realized I can't use magic, I've been taking a number of precautions. I avoided crowded places to keep from contracting any illnesses. I also refused to eat food that I wasn't familiar with. That technically makes sense of why she wanted certain things made, and like the Nanahoshi-yaki and stuff was pushing different types of foods, which makes you kind of wonder how she lasted going to like the demon continent and the Beggaret continent. She probably didn't want to eat any of that food. Don't you think this world is pretty strange to begin with? There are monsters here heavy enough to crush you, and I don't know if it's magic or what, but this world seems to ignore the laws of physics altogether. I mean, okay, sure, I thought this place was pretty cool when I first came. Interesting. So she didn't always hate it. I've actually played quite a few video games myself, and I don't hate swords and magic and stuff. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find that kind of stuff exciting. Part of me felt jealous of you being able to reincarnate to a world like this. Her voice trailed off suddenly, shoulders trembling. Slowly, she turned her face towards him, her eyes red, puffy, and welling up. I don't want to die. Tears came falling as if a dam burst inside of her. I don't want to die in a place like this, not in this freaky weird world. Why? Why is this happening to me? It doesn't make any sense. Do you know that my body hasn't changed once in these past 8 years? I haven't grown any taller. My hair is the same length as it ever was, but my stomach growls. And if I eat, I still poop, yet my nails won't grow, and I haven't had any periods either. She lashed out, grabbing a pitcher and flinging across the room. I'm not a human of this world. I'm not even living here. I'm like a walking corpse, so why? Why am I able to get sick? It's completely messed up. Why does things like this happen to me? I don't want to die. I don't want to die in this stupid, weird world. The tears came faster and faster as she wailed. I mean, I haven't even kissed anyone. I haven't even told the guy I love how I feel yet. I'm so jealous of you. You enjoy every single day, living each moment to its fullest. What do you even have to be sad about? Oh, so your dad died and your mom has a serious illness. So what? Who cares? I won't even get to see my dad before I die. My mom's not even gonna know that I'm gone. I miss them. I miss both my mom and my dad. I still remember the morning that I was teleported here. My dad said that he was gonna come home early, and my mom said that she was gonna grill some mackerel for dinner. I told him that I had friends coming over, so I'd prefer him not to come home early. And I told my mom that I was sick of death of mackerel. Why? Why did I say those things? I'm sure they're both really worried. I miss them. I wanna go home. I don't wanna die. I don't wanna die here. She buried her face in her knees. Muffling sobs spilled out of her. The pain of her voice was daggers to his heart. When he first came to this world, he wouldn't have... I need to stop right there. I need to stop right there. All that hurts. All that really hurts. There's like multiple facets to this. One is the aspect of, yes, her acknowledging, yes, this world seems cool. Of course I would want to be part of this world. But again, remember, she came to this world and she had nothing. Marius, you have magic powers and you're able to fit right in. You're able to cast super cool spells. She was not just normal, but minus normal. 0 mana, no capabilities. No mana pool means no battle aura. No mana means no spells. She can't be a caster. She can't be a melee. She can't do really anything but become what she really technically does come, which is a merchant. That's not fun. That's nothing different in a world. Like, it's swords and magic and stuff like that. You want to do those things. You don't want to become a merchant in the world. And technically, there's a lot of fun in that as well. But still, you know where I'm going with this. But it sucks, that idea that it kind of twists into the mindset of, and I can't have everything that I wanted. I can't even say I love you to the person that I loved. And then when it comes to this whole situation, what are you to be sad about? Don't look at me like you're sad. Don't try to act like you know what I'm going through. Don't look depressed looking down at me when I'm dying. You have everything. What do you have to be sad about? And all these complaints that you have about the experience you've gone through, like you losing your dad. I don't ever get to see my parents and everything like that. And I have these regrets. I did these things and then I regret them now. I kind of mentioned that earlier with that idea that these tragedies happen when you don't want them to happen. Yes, sure enough, she said all these mean things to her parents and then got teleported. I can't go back and fix that now. It sucks. Don't even know if they're still alive at this point, because it's been this time period. Again, that whole idea of not knowing if time is parallel between the two worlds. If she goes back, does she go back to the point where she transported, or does she go back at the current time? Because parallel worlds and time flow differences and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of emotion in there. When Reese first came to this world, he wouldn't have empathized with her at all. Reese thought the words, I miss them. I want to go home. I want to see my family again. The person he was would have been baffled to hear anyone say such things. He would have told them to enjoy this world. Now things were different. He understood wanting to go home and see his family. Again, volume 12. He finally wanted to go back and see them. And it only took losing Paul. He knew how precious those seemingly monotonous days could be. Once they were gone, you could never get them back. Ever. Paul was dead. Zenith's memories might never come back. The warm family he knew from Buena Village was gone. However, in its place, he now had family to protect. Sylphie, Roxy, Lucy, Lilia, Aisha, Norn, Zenith, Dillo, Groot. If he was separated from his girls forever, he would tear his heart in two. I like this. Yes, technically he's finally, again in volume 12, realized that desire to want to go back to see his family, go see his brother, all that kind of stuff, that regret that he had there. But right here, he's equating himself to her through his current situation. If I was pulled away from this world right now, I would be torn up. And that's how I can somewhat know what she's going through. Whereas, if you asked him right when he was first teleported to the world, he had no connections. He doesn't care about anything. He has no semblance of family at that point. So he would not know how she feels at that point. It would tear his heart in two. If any of them vanished, he would go to the ends of the world to find them. And if he was transported back into his old world, it wouldn't matter if he couldn't use magic there, or if girls tripped over themselves for his attention. He would still be dead set on returning back to this world. Even if I go to that other world, and I can't use magic, and all these girls are clamoring over me. I mean, I get this huge, massive harem in the other world. Still want to go back to my family. It's no longer about, I want women. It's, I want this family. They're more than just bodies. Nanahoshi's entire body shook as she squeezed her arms around her knees. She never got closer to Zenoba, Cliff, or Sylphie than necessary. But she always listened to Rudius. When he asked her something, she would oblige. When he had a party, she would attend. In hindsight, she never treated him unkindly. She brightened up a bit whenever they spoke in Japanese. As the only person who could speak their mother tongue, he was her one respite from it all. Please, someone, save me. Nanahoshi cried out in a quiet voice. Rudius stood and returned to the meeting room to find Petagus still in his seat. He's like, all right. It's like the whole Sarah thing. So where's she at? All right, peace. Step up and go. That is that aspect of like that pain there, is that idea that Rudius is the only one that can really... It's good that he's the only one there. He knows that she can break down any moment. He says the reason why he's there is because she could lose it right now. She's in a state where she shouldn't be alone. But at the same time, he's the only one that can truly comfort her. Because he's the only one that she can burst out at. Like, if everybody else in that room, she might still even have hesitation of yelling all that stuff. I want to go back home. I want to go back. I don't want to be here. I played video games, blah, 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 blah. Rudius is the only one that understands all that. And so he's the best one to kind of stand there. But at the same time, he's also the biggest pain for her because he's the one that accepted this world and she didn't. And more so now than ever, she couldn't. Even if she wanted to, she couldn't accept this world because the world can't accept her. The world right here in this situation, the world is rejecting her.
This illness is rejecting her. Pedagus's familiars had left, but he remained waiting in the room.
What is it?
I'll save her. I would greatly appreciate if you could spare me any assistance, but I won't ask for more than what you're willing to give. His brows lifted in surprise, but then he nodded.
Oh, you're going to look for a way to save her?
He stared fixedly at Rudius, as if trying to ascertain how genuine he was. Rudius sensed that he was being skeptic, as if he didn't think Rudius would do anything unless it benefited himself. Again, this kind of makes me believe that he was testing Rudius in a way. Having nothing to hide and not the calculative type, Rudius just stared back at him.
Very well. I would be aggrieved to see her die as well.
Rudius thought this was great, but where to start? The illness was extinguished 7,000 years ago. None of them had any clue where to look for a cure. If a cure was this simple, Pedagus would have said something. Maybe a magical implement? He had no idea that would do the trick. Cliff made something for Elise, but it hadn't cured her. Still, perhaps he could do the same for Nanahoshi, and gradually add improvements. That would work, however it would require them to monitor her, and Nanahoshi didn't have that much time. She vomited blood this flare-up. Yudizu cured her symptoms, but it would reappear soon. Plus, her body, frozen in time, they couldn't experiment. Yeah, that's kind of the idea that, like, yeah, there's technically this option, which again was technically my first option here, was this idea of, okay, do the same thing you did with Elise. Have this implement that's on her, preferably not underwear this time, Cliff. Just joking. Having this thing that's on her all the time that is affecting that mana. But at the same time, how are you going to test it? She's going to die soon. And she has to be put into stasis right now. And it's not like you can just throw it on her and go, did it work? I don't know. She's frozen. I can't tell if she's coughing still. It's just like one of those moments where you're realizing the short time that you have and what options do you have. Implement aside, they could look for somebody that knew a treatment. Man-God? Or maybe Orsted? They were the first to come to mind. Problem was that they had no way of contacting the Man-God. With luck, he could visit him tonight in order to impart his advice, which, yeah, that's like the convenient option. Like, the Man-God ever shows up when you need him. The Man-God only shows up whenever he wants you to do something. But their communication was entirely by the Man-God's leisure. Lord Pedagus, is there any way for us to contact Dragon God Orsted?
No. I do not know his current location.
That's interesting because it does really feel like he knows where a lot of people are at. Like, in a minute, he's going to know where Kishirika is. And it's like, well, is it kind of the same situation that Orsted has with Rudius? It's curious. Because, again, I think the Man-God even says that he didn't know where he was at. He's like, oh, man, I didn't think you were going to run into that guy.
In any case, I doubt that he would know a solution either. He only appeared in this world about 100 years ago. Wise though he may be, he would know no cureness for something 7,000 years ago.
So Orsted was only about 100 years old then? Yeah, that's a massive, huh? But he says this world. Appeared in this world. Very curious. He doesn't say he was born in this world. Appeared in this world. So I'm going to put a pin on that sucker. Question mark. All right, but who in this world would know about a 7,000-year-old... Rudius' voice trailed off. He just remembered one such person. He didn't get any sense that they knew a lot about diseases, but there was no harm in asking. Actually, there is one that comes to my mind.
Oh.
However, Rudius didn't know where to find them. The last time they had found them was coincidence. Still, he had to do something. Would it be possible to send me to the Demon Continent?
The Demon Continent? And what do you plan to do there?
He only met this person once. Roxy apparently ran into them as well. He knew their name, or her name, for a long time now. Studied her exploits when living in the Fatoa region. Their meeting was one he'd never forget. I'd like to track down the demon world's great emperor, Kishirika Kishirisu. Kishirika was the name of the woman responsible for the first great human demon war that happened over 7,000 years ago. We're finally bringing back Kishirika. Finally! Holy crap, we haven't seen her since Volume 3? Holy smoke. Well, technically she popped in for like a brief moment with Roxy and team, but yeah, I wonder if Rudius knew about the fact that she has to stay on that continent, because I know that I think it was implied to Elise when she was going to leave to go to see Rudius. It was at that point where she finally discovered that. So Roxy wasn't there at that time, but she could know that in general. But I'd be curious maybe if Elise told Rudius at some point, yeah, Kishirika can't leave that continent. And so that would make him know, okay, that narrows it down to at least this continent. We don't have to go to Millis. We don't have to go over here or anything like that, or Begarit or anything. Divine Continent. We can go straight to the Demon Continent. But yeah, very, very, very emotional chapter. I'm glad I got that not too bad, but thankfully it wasn't a massively long chapter like last chapter. I'm not going to let that one go. But yeah, it is curious to see that Pedagus isn't like against this idea. Like he's not throwing it out the window. But that does make sense because it's not like Pedagus fought Kishirika. Like, again, he doesn't like demons, and he could see that Kishirika is a threat. But, again, his focus is Laplace. Laplace is his threat. boss is the one that he's keeping an eye on. He doesn't care about these other demons. He doesn't want them in his castle, but at the same time, he's not going after them. And yes, he knows where she's at, which is kind of curious. But let's move on. Chapter 5, Return to the Demon Continent. We're finally going back, boys. We're finally going back. Plans were simple. Petagus would get them to the Demon Continent, where they would search for and ask Kishirika if she knew about a cure for Dryden syndrome. If not, if she knew someone that did. Problem was, she tended to wander the continent. I could see her marching. I could just imagine her marching around in that clip in the anime. So there was no telling how long it would take. Petagus did agree to make a teleportation circle for them to the Demon Continent's central hubs, allowing them to teleport to most towns from his castle. So it's like they're able to kind of just jump around to different locations from the pressing buttons and turning things off from the castle, which is kind of cool. Kind of reminds me of those central hubs in a lot of games where like you go to this central point and there's like all these portals around the room. It's weird. It's cool. Travel time anxiety out of the way. With luck, they could find Kishirika within a week. Teleportation circles were a bit terrifying. It made sense that they were forbidden, and Orchid and Petagus were using them in secret. I don't think that Orchid's using them in secret. I don't think he cares, but yes, he is hiding them because he doesn't want them to destroy them. Access to them would allow an army to bypass defenses and terrain. Though Rudius was sure that Orchid and Petagus wasn't the only ones using them. There was also probably other forbidden spells and tools that were being used in secret. Such was the way of this world. When I read this, I immediately thought, yeah, you have a couple things that you are thinking are possibly forbidden as well that you're working on, Rudius. Like the whole thing with the whole puppet. Like he immediately thought, man, this could be like some forbidden stuff. So we might want to do this elsewhere. He thought about actually telling the guild, but no, he's like, oh, let's do this in secret over here. But yes, it does technically make sense, this idea that this is a forbidden art, because nobody, I think any nation in the world doesn't want people to use it. But again, he's kind of noting it right here, but are they not using it? It's like all these countries come to an agreement, like, let's stop using these teleportation circles because it's allowing people to invade our territories really easily. It's causing more conflict than ever. Again, they were kind of mentioning the idea that there's a lot of groups within the middle continent that don't want the university to exist, but they're so far away, it's not like they're going to attack each other. They would have to march all the way through the central continent, pass through other countries that would see them as invading just to get up there. Or technically, I guess you can swim around if that's around. If this is technically a sphere world, it could be a flat. It could be flat Earth theory in this world. So coming to agreement not to use these teleportation circles does technically keep conflict to a minimum. If they had teleportation circles, I'm sure that there's groups within the middle church like, let's go destroy this university. Don't let it get too big. Don't let them get too powerful. But again, like I said, I believe there's probably a good chance that a lot of these countries, even though they don't say they know about the technology or where it's at, they might have them, and they're just waiting to use them. They just don't use them yet because they don't want the rest of the world to know that they have that ability. And yes, he kind of plays into it right here, saying that there's probably a lot of tools and secrets and stuff that they're using, and technically things that they're developing that could eventually become forbidden. Like the whole idea of having a spell, that arms race they're having with detoxification magic, and this idea of creating poisons that can destroy another nation, and this arms war happening. Those things could eventually become forbidden arts or techniques. If you essentially create a worldwide plague that is like, that can be transmitted through the air, you might not want that to exist in the world. That all said, Reese had no qualms with cheating and using such magic to speed up their search. They would be using Roxy's strategy. When she came to the Demon Continent to search for Rudius, she visited each city individually and searched them thoroughly before moving on, as well as putting in requests to each adventure guild, in case Kishirika happened to go somewhere they just visited. So if they managed to pass Kishirika and she goes back to one they already searched, there'll be a notice on the board there, hey, if you see Kishirika, grab her. Which is kind of funny. They were paying handsomely for anyone that could manage to capture her, unharmed of course. With travel only taking a day, he guessed it would take maybe a year. Reese explained the plan to everyone. Sylvie had regained her consciousness, but the treatment took a toll on her. Thin to begin with, she was now almost skeletal. She needed to take it at least 5 days to regain her strength. He spoke up. In order to save Nanahoshi, I would like all of you to help. Ariel replied, if that's what you wish, I would gladly lend you my magical implements. She offered up one of her rings that she wore. Okay. I'm not the type that whenever I go, man, I'm not in good shape, and somebody goes, here, okay, I'll help you, and I'm going, oh, you will? Here, have a pin. I'm not gonna go, okay, don't give me a pin. I would probably take the pin, but I have to admit, when I read, I'll lend you my magical implements, I'm thinking like the boots. I'm thinking of like, what else do you have? I mean, we've already kind of described the idea of the boots being like this super fast speed. Luke is like covered in magical. Both Luke and Fitz are just covered in magical implements, or magical items. I think they were mentioning that they're magical items instead, but still, it's like the ring. Like of all the things that you could offer to help, the ring. Now, granted, watch this be like something that's really, really useful later on, I'm sure, but there's still like an idea of like, oh, thanks. I can light up a ring for somebody else just by pouring mana into this ring. She offered one of her rings that she wore, one that signaled another ring when mana was poured into it. A secret treasure of the Asura Kingdom to alert another person of danger. He figured that could be useful at some point. I will admit here, there is technically another side of this that, yes, this is the ring that she has to wear in case something happens to her, somebody comes to attack her, she can pour mana into it and tell somebody to come to protect her. So her giving this up is like her giving up the signification that she's going to die. So this is actually does mean a lot to her. This is a big deal for her. Zenoba, Miss Ellen Lace, I would like you to come with me. Yes, he's bringing best boy and he's bringing best girl. He's bringing the dream team. This is literally the dream team that I was kind of hoping would happen with Begaret. The dream team is Zenoba and Ellen Lace. Reese wanted 2 bodyguards. Zenoba, being a blessed child, this is a very interesting little segment right here. This is like one of those moments where it's like, this is insignificant, I know, but it's a big deal to me. Zenoba was a blessed child. If they faced a Hydra again, he could surely handle it. With Rudius being unable to produce a battle aura, his defenses were weak. Though on the magic side, he had disturbed magic and mana absorption stones. With Zenoba as a vanguard, they'd have a chance if they faced another Hydra. Of course, he'd be devastated if he got overconfident and it led to his death, which is why he added Ellen Lace as support. Keeps bringing up Hydra, and it makes sense technically. This idea that the last time I went out somewhere, the last time I went on an adventure, last time I went on a search party, Hydra costed me big. Now I'm planning ahead for this next trip. It's not like you're going to run into that same Hydra, unless he's flagging it right now, and he totally does. It's not like you're going to run into that same Hydra, but yet it keeps popping up in his head. I need to plan for Hydra. What if Hydra happens? Hydra. That is something that can't keep out of his head because, again, search here, Hydra. Now I'm doing it again. What if it happens again? It just gets stuck in there. But yeah, I don't think I'd ever go anywhere without Ellen Lace, dude. She's always got to come along. Cliff spoke up. What about me? I'd like you to create a magical implement. Reese had no guarantee that Kishika would know about the sickness. Therefore, he wanted to approach the situation from multiple angles. Nanahoshi's illness was similar to a curse. If Cliff worked off his current research, he might be able to make an item to extend her life. But Cliff protested. No, I'm going with you. Please take me along. I want to do something for Nanahoshi too. I implore you, Rudius. I understand the feeling of wanting to go back home. Cliff was short, but already 19. He had been away from Millis for about 6 to 7 years now. While his desire to go home wasn't exactly the same as Nanahoshi, he could empathize with her on a certain level. Which, yes, technically does make sense. I think there is an element there. And again, that goes back to that idea that it does kind of imply this idea that Cliff does have some sort of knowledge about what she's doing. Obviously, if he's helping her with the research, he knows what she's doing. He knows that she's trying to get back to somewhere. After thought, Reese finally agreed. Seriously? Reese was already taking Ellen Lace, and with Nanahoshi frozen in time, there was very little what Cliff could do in his research at that moment. If they came up empty-handed, they can always research later. Yes, Master Cliff, I'd happy to have you come along. Sylphie spoke up. And what about me? What should I do? Sylphie needed to recover some strength. So, there was no way that she could come along. Besides, Sylphie, I want you to rest for the time being. Sure, but after that, what then? When you finish recovering, I'd like you to return home and look after Lucy. What? Her face clouded over. I might not be able to come home for the foreseeable future. I don't think it's good for a child to be away from both their parents for so long. Rudius wasn't saying that a child absolutely need their parents to have a proper childhood development, but Paul and Zenith were the reason that Rudius grew up the way he did. He's changed so much. It was better for a child if they had parents to look after them. It was fine that the mom and dad leave for a week or two, but not leave a child without parents for months on end. Again, this is kind of Rudius showing that change in his mindset. Back when my previous world, I had an experience with being without parents for a long time, and I did just fine, but that's where he's hesitating there. I'm not saying that you can't, but I did so much better here. I changed so much because I had Paul and Zenith there for me. I changed because I had some point realization that Paul was important to me. I didn't get that experience before. So I'm not saying that it can't happen, but it's better to have this. It's a very complicated conversation to get through, and it's not like I want to make this entire Mushoku Monday into that whole topic, but it does at least acknowledge from Rudy's perspective. Let's focus in on what Rudy has experienced. These are two different things, and I acknowledge that both can exist, but this seemingly was better. Sylphie conceded. Okay, I guess you do have a point. If you're not around, it's up to me to look after her. Sorry. No, it's fine. Despite telling Sylphie that Nanahoshi's condition wasn't her fault, it was clear Sylphie still wanted to help. Sylphie, you've already done more than enough. I'll take care of the rest. Trust me. I know. She nodded with a look of disappointment. It wasn't that she didn't love Lucy. This is a very, very interesting thing that I didn't even think was going to get into, but this is actually a very broader, interesting subject around Sylphie and her relationship with Lucy. Reese thought it wasn't like she didn't love Lucy, but Sylphie had fended for herself since she was 10, thanks to the displacement incident. Her parents died before they could reunite. Sylphie had largely survived by luck and people that she met, but she still worked hard at her job and put effort into their marriage. Perhaps she thought a child would be fine without parents. Or maybe it was more widespread belief in this world that a child didn't always need their parents to watch over them. Either way, Sylphie was still only 18. People's way of thinking didn't suddenly change when they had kids. Instead, they matured over years as they raised a kid. The thought of having kids never even occurred to Rudius when he was 18 in his previous life. In that respect, Sylphie was doing fantastic. There's a lot in here. There's a lot in here. Yes, I can see where Rudius is going here. I can see that idea that, from Rudius' perspective, he can see that Sylphie had spent most of her not most of her childhood, a good chunk of her childhood. If you put a spectrum of childhood as 1 through 16 or 1 through 18, it's different for every different country and every different culture. We all perceive childhood differently. Some see that childhood is only to 13. Some say that it's to 16. Some say that it's to 18. Let's go over the broader term here and the idea that it's 18 years. And the idea that Sylphie has only just recently became an adult. And so this segment of 8 years of her 18 years of childhood was literally having nothing, having no parents or anything like that. Yes, you can assume that that Sylphie can have a mindset that Lucy's going to be fine. I was fine. Not that she's thinking that, like, Lucy's going to be fine. I grew up just fine without new parents. Because technically there are some people that think that way. That could be what sort of makes her less fearful for leaving Lucy behind. Lucy has, the fact that Lucy does have people around her. It's not like she's alone. This would be a completely different story if they didn't have Lilia there and everybody to watch after Lucy. But this idea that she's fine without a parent. I was fine without a parent. I had other people that were at my side. I didn't need parents. As much as it hurts her to have lost her parents, she did just fine. So I can see where Rudius is coming to a conclusion here, because it does make sense to me. This idea that this girl, at the age of 10, was removed from everything. Removed from seemingly all stability, and managed to survive. And so it doesn't really always pop into her head, the idea of somebody's got to be with Lucy. Somebody's got to be with Lucy. Specifically, a parent needs to be with Lucy. So it's another interesting element to kind of add to Sylphie's character. Sylphie continued, I do think that Roxy will have some word for you if you're going to the Demon Continent. There's none amongst us more familiar with that place than her. You're right about that. If I run into any problem while I'm there, I'll be sure to consult Roxy when I get back. Rudius did want to have Roxy come along. Yes, this is another one that's like, yeah, I thought about the same thing, but then it makes sense what he's about to say. Pedagogus wouldn't let a demon on board. He had rebuffed Rudius when he tried to ask directly. That said, Roxy had her career to think about. It would be a shame for her to get fired after a year. While Rudius wanted to save Nanahoshi, he didn't want it to be at the cost of his family and everything they built. That's why he wanted Roxy and Sylphie to look after everyone and keep things running. Okay, so yeah, it seems that Rudius did go to Pedagogus directly and say, can you let my wife onto this floating platform, please? I know she's a demon, but she's a good person. He said, no. So that does still suck. Again, that's still that negative for Pedagogus for me, is that prejudice against Roxy, even though I understand it. But yeah, additionally, the idea that here that's getting into is this idea that, and this kind of hurts. This does sound kind of mean. This idea that despite the fact that I want to help Nanahoshi, I want to save Nanahoshi's life, I don't want it to cost me my own joys. I want to save this person and bring her back into her joy, but I can't let this joy be destroyed. It has to come at not a great cost. And that does sound really selfish. I'd be perfectly clear now. I'm going to be honest. This does sound selfish. But that's what it means to be a father. That's what it means to be a husband. Your family always takes priority. No matter how much you want to help other people, it cannot come at the cost of what you are supposed to protect. Everybody has what they have to protect. And sometimes you are having to go out of your comfort zone, away from what you're protecting, in order to help somebody else with what they're protecting, their life, the desire to go home. But you can't let that cost you what you're supposed to protect. So even if it does sound selfish, this is what it means to be a father, to be a husband, to be a loved one. Your family is always first. Part of this was Rudius' ego talking. His words weren't exactly wisdom for the ages, but all the same, he didn't want Roxy and Sylphie walking into danger. He never wanted to witness someone he loved die again. Not after Paul. Nowhere in this world was entirely safe, but the demon continent was far more dangerous than the city of Shariah. Now, there's another added thing to kind of add on to it. That idea that it's not just about protecting, being a husband and protecting this thing that they have built, like this home, these riches, these jobs, but it's more of an aspect, I don't want Roxy and Sylphie to come with me. He's literally pretty much saying right here, I don't want them to come with me. Because of after what I've faced before, again, Hydra. Can't stop thinking about it. Last time I went out adventuring, last time I went out searching was Hydra. I don't want to bring them because Hydra. What if I run into a Hydra again? He's going to correct himself here in a minute. The idea that, yes, I'm bringing Eloise and Zenobo along, and it's not like I want them to get hurt, but I don't want, most of all, these two to get hurt. It is one of those sad things where you start to prioritize the things in your life that you don't want harmed. Again, obviously, he doesn't want any of these people to get harmed, but there's some that just absolutely not. Sylphie spoke up. Please don't lose an arm or anything this time, okay? I'll be careful. He had Zenobo and Eloise with him. Though he'd sacrifice his right arm in order to keep them from sacrificing themselves, but things would go much better this time around. He was sure. He had to do it. He had to do it. He had to do it. You gotta say it. You have to flag it. Rudius returned to tell Roxy the rest of the situation. Aisha in particular looked anxious. While he'd be returning every few days, he told them that he'd be gone longer, just in case something unforeseen happened. All right, I'm leaving things here to you. Roxy replied, okay, you be careful, Rudy. While Rudius thought that Roxy would insist on coming along, she agreed after hearing all the details. It was a bit anticlimactic, actually. It's like one of those aspects of like, he sort of acknowledges the idea that Roxy, after hearing the situation, which I'm sure he probably implied the idea that, yes, we're going to teleport from the floating fortress to different locations, she's immediately going to understand, yeah, it's not like I can complain because I'm not going to be able to go there. Like, I literally cannot go to that floating fortress. There's no reason to complain. There's no reason to say, but no, I want to go. But there's a side that he's like, I kind of want her to go, no, Rudy, I want to go with you. And it's like, it's kind of that aspect of accepting what can't be changed versus I kind of want her to protest a little bit. It's goofy. Petagus mentioned there's a chance that they would be unable to use the teleportation to come back to the fortress. In that case, they could use a certain magical implement in front of one of the monuments of the Seven Great Powers. There's where it kind of confirms that idea that every single one of those monuments of the Seven Great Powers is pretty much like a communication point, which is very interesting. Which makes me believe that Petagus made the actual monuments. And again, they said that they were magical, that they would actually adjust based on the powers themselves changing. So I'm curious at what point they're going to run into one of those, maybe when they have to go back or something like that, and they're going to see that it's changed. When they use this magical implement, it would contact them, at which point they would send somebody to retrieve them. It wasn't as if Rudius didn't trust him, but you never knew what would happen. Laplace could revive the second they left. Technically makes sense. If they go to some place on the demon continent and then suddenly that radar goes off, whomp, 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 Laplace is back, yeah, don't expect a reply. And there's a chance that he loses against Laplace, and for sure you ain't gonna get no help at that point. It's time to walk. At that point, Petagus would be too preoccupied to worry about them. For that reason, Rudius prepared a large sum of money and items to barter with, as well as a map of the teleportation ruins. That's the good thing there, is that even if Laplace does get preoccupied, at least they can find a teleportation ruins and figure out a way to get back to their home quickly, rather than having to, again, spend another 3 years going all the way across the world. Sabral led them to a teleportation circle located in the basement 3rd floor. Lord Petagus has newly drawn this circle. It is linked to a circle on the demon continent that is long gone unused. What do you mean, long gone unused? There are many teleportation circles in the world whose connecting circles, for whatever reason, have been destroyed, leaving them inactive. Teleportation circles only operated when both sides were connected. By linking the circle to one that had been decoupled, he could restore its functionality. That technically doesn't make sense. Because in the teleportation ruins of the labyrinth, there was many that were one-way teleportations. Now, they didn't specify this idea that when you got teleported somewhere, there wasn't a circle there. It's just that you couldn't use it to go back. So maybe there was an actual circle on the other side. It's just they weren't really noting it. But that was kind of my mentality that I had there, was that yes, you do had two-way circles that you could step on, it would take you somewhere and it would take you back. Then you had random ones that would randomly throw you around. But it's not like there was any indication that there was circles everywhere and it would randomly take you to one of the circles. Because there was a lot of emphasis on the idea of being teleported into walls and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's kind of curious to mention the idea that you have to have them coupled. Unless he specifically mentioned the idea of teleportation circles that are two-way have to be coupled with something. That makes more sense. And Lord Pedagogus knows all the teleportation circles out there. He is powerful and great. He is powerful and great. She sounds so proud. It would be honestly useful to link up a bunch of new circles to the old ones, but such power is forbidden, and Rudius was sure that Pedagogus wouldn't teach it to him. Plus, fiddling with things would only net Rudius more enemies. He always comes down to that conclusion, like, yeah, this sounds really cool, but then probably gonna run into bad people. It brings attention to yourself. Again, that was the whole idea of like having some great title. Does that mean that I can call myself Emperor Earth Magician or whatever? It's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. See where that leads you to. Man, I want to be on that. I want to be on that stone for the 7 great powers. Sure, go right ahead. Have fun dealing with how many people are going to come to challenge you to get themselves on that plate. The thought of that was terrifying. No need to be greedy. Plus, anyone could use the circles. A fearsome monster could stumble upon one of them. Creating a bunch without regard to consequences could lead to a destruction of an entire village. With great power comes great responsibility. It's like that big, massive quote right there. You think it's great, but then you destroy a village because you linked something that you shouldn't have linked. Which kind of makes sense to a lot of these doors being locked. I'm curious how many of these locked doors are because behind it is a teleportation circle that leads to somewhere that somebody could jump onto and make it back there. Lord Pedagogus said this circle would lead you to a place close to the Great Demon Emperor. Wait, so he knows where she is? Of course. That said, there is a possibility his calculations are off. Yeah, that's not surprising. Rudius knew the Demon Emperor was unpredictable. I like this idea that, like, he's right, she's right, yeah, he knows where she's at. Wait, really? Yeah, he's damn smart. At the same time, it could be off. And then Rudius is like, yeah, makes sense, because how do you calculate this girl? Because she's all over the place. She's a random number generator, and he's somehow managing to generate a prediction to that random generation, which is pretty crazy. Find her in one place, she'd wander somewhere else. Her fiance was the same in that regard. It just reminded me right here, that's right, we still don't know where Bodygotti is. I want Bodygotti so bad. Then Rudius thought, alright, I've forgotten about Bodygotti. Maybe he already returned to his own territory. It seemed that he also lived a long time, so asking him about the syndrome might not be a bad idea either. Alright, we'll check it out anyways. We haven't checked your destination. It's a possibility the circle on the other end is located in a path with no exit. Please be cautious. You mean, you think it's closed off? Possibly. In order to conceal its location, someone may have sealed the entrance. Good point. Without an entrance, no one could discover it. There was people that searched for hidden doors, but few took pickaxes to walls. Well, if it looks like we can't get through it all, we'll just come back here. I wish you good fortune. After that, they stepped into the magic circle, to the demon continent. We're finally going back to the demon continent. Woo! I'm pretty excited to go back to the demon continent. I was kind of hoping they would pop up somewhere else, but it makes sense where they popped up. After stepping on the magic circle, Rudius wondered how many times he had teleported like this at this point. Displacement incident, twice to the Beggaret continent, once to the floating fortress. At this point, he was getting used to the sensation. Kind of implies this idea that it feels similar no matter which one it is. Because you would think that the displacement incident was probably much different than probably going to, like, the Beggaret continent. Because Beggaret continent, he was talking about the idea that it almost was like you were being pulled on, at least what they were seeing the person being pulled down. But at the same time, it was almost like they were losing consciousness. Whereas with, like, Pedagogus and the displacement incident, those were where he's seeing what's happening. Like, he's seeing what's around him. With the displacement incident, he's talking about how he's seeing the horizon underneath him smearing past him, and he's looking for a spot to fall. With Pedagogus, he's being pulled through a white space. It seems like all of them are different visually and what he experiences, but they feel the same. The sensation's the same. There's a commonality, basically. On the other side, he was greeted with a dark room. Stench of mold and dust was heavy. A place long since abandoned. Behind Rudius, the other three arrived. Elalace was unfazed. Zenoba strode in confidently. Master, yeah. It makes you wonder, like, is this an aspect of Zenoba's a dork? Zenoba's not impressed by teleportation. He's impressed by monuments. So something like this isn't going to impress him, even though it's technically like a design marvel, which should impress him somewhat. Or has he experienced this type of teleportation before? Not like the Pedagogus, because obviously all three of these have experienced this. Elise has experienced this type. Cliff and Zenoba has experienced Pedagus's type. But this one's kind of different. But yes, Cliff was intrigued by the process.
The air here sure is stale. Let us leave this place quickly.
After scanning the walls, Rudius figured that they were in a closed-off room. Everyone split off to look for an exit. After a while, Elise found a wall that had an adjacent room, indicated by an echo from knocking on the wall. Okay, it's punching time, Zenoba.
Humph.
Despite being 50 centimeters thick, he slammed his fist through the wall, continuously punching like he was a child toppling down a sandcastle. I like that mental image. That's a good way to equate it. It's just like slamming it down. Annalise asked for a lamplight spirit before she headed in first. Cliff groaned as the light illuminated bleached white bones on the floor. Annalise spoke up. It appears this place was once a prison. Some of the skeletons had metal cuffs on them. Cliff's expression turned sorrowful as she clasped his hand. My lord, Millis, grant them a salvation in death. Reese followed his example, placing his hands together and giving a chant to Buddha, an apology to the dead for disturbing them. This place was covered in bones, making Rudius wonder how they were locked up. He wondered what the dead would think if they knew there was a teleportation circle just on the other side of the wall. But Pedagogue said that it wasn't connected anywhere anymore. Perhaps these people teleported here and then got sealed in with magic. If that were the case, then whoever did this was awfully cruel. Again, this kind of goes back to that whole discussion about them using it during the war itself. Teleporting armies into locations. Teleporting right in the middle of a fort or something like that. So yes, if you're in a war and you suddenly notice that some teleportation circle is created, you seal that place off and you trap them in there. Which, again, if it's on the Demon Continent, who's that person going to be? Probably Kishirika. But in war, you have to do these kind of things. You have to protect yourself. And so yes, you're going to seal off a location. You're going to keep them from invading you. Annalise found some stairs in the corner of the room. Reese thought the prisoners weren't kept in cells, or so he thought until he noticed that there was hinges on the floor. Maybe there was once wooden bars holding them in. At the top of the stairs was a metal hatch. Annalise carefully checked for traps before opening it, but it seemed there was something heavy on top of it. All right, Zenoba Robo, time for you to blast it open.
Master, what is this robo thing you speak of?
Oh, in some regions I've been to, that's what they call men whose bodies are made of steel and possess monstrous strength.
Ha ha ha, so that's what it means. Humph.
Zenoba pushed it up before sand started to fall in. While Reese handled the sand with magic, Zenoba continued to press on. Soon, light punched through the cracks. Zenoba forced the lid open enough for Annalise to check the other side. It was clear. Climbing out, they found themselves in a steep incline. A slope covered in reddish-brown dirt. Boulders strewn as far as the eyes can see. In the distance lay a forest that resembled the bones of a fish. An unique sight only found in the Demon Continent. There was a great tortoise off in the distance. So, this is the Demon Continent. Cliff gulped, cautiously gazing down the incline. There was no city nearby, or at least one that Rudius can see. He wondered how close they were actually to Kishirika, maybe in a nearby city. He thought of maybe even returning to ask. Master Cliff, the Demon Continent is enormous and dangerous. Worse, many monsters here cluster together, so please be careful. Cliff nodded with a serious expression. Yeah, I know. Even a skilled warrior could lose her life wandering around, thinking that it was safe as Central and Mills Continent. There are no monsters in our vicinity. We're safe at the moment. Annalise wasn't letting her guard down. Reese wanted to think that he wasn't either. He had an easy time here with Resort at his side, but he felt that his experience on Begarit can be used now. Reese continued, also, I want to warn you that there's not that many people here of Mill's faith. Their way of thinking is much different than yours. So try not to start any unnecessary fights. I already know. Cliff cut himself off and cleared his throat before continuing. No, you're right. Understand. It's like he was about to go, dude, I know. Oh yeah, I know. Okay, yes, I got you. Maybe that sounded a little bit too condescending. But Cliff had never been anywhere with this many demon folk. Picking fights over insignificant differences in opinion would cause a problem. This wasn't like when he was traveling with Eris. He wanted to avoid conflict as much as possible. It's like he's acknowledging the idea that Eris caused a lot of conflicts, but he's like, I don't want to. This is different. Whatever we did back there, I'm doing things differently this time. Mainly because I think there's a lot of emphasis right here in time. We don't have much time. We got to get this stuff done. And he wants to get back home. He's got a lot of things that he wants to return home for. Whereas when he got displaced, he didn't really have those connections with his family. He didn't want to get back home. He doesn't care. He was just more worried about getting Edis home. That was all he cared about. I love this. I love this girl so much. Annalise spoke up. Cliff doesn't know the demon tongue, so you won't have to worry. I love this conversation's happening, and then Annalise comes in and goes, Rudius, dumbass. He can't speak their tongue. He doesn't even know what they're saying, and they don't know what he's saying. Like, yeah, that's true. This was true. Even Annalise couldn't speak demon tongue. When she traveled here before, Roxy did most of the talking. That said, Annalise did have some sexual terms down. She at least didn't make much attempts to try to learn the demon tongue, but she did learn some very specific terms. It's like one of those breakdowns that they used to do, especially like in the second volume, where it would always have like these little moments at the end of the chapter where it would have like a status update. Like it would have name and then Edis, and they would say like, skill this, and it would have like, beginner this thing. This one is like literally Elise, age 200 plus, demon tongue experience, sexual terms. Cliff would probably faint to learn her daily life here, but that was because of her curse, of course.
Master!
Zenoba was already at the crest of the slope, bellowing down at them. It's like they're talking about, Cliff and everything, and then suddenly he's like, damn, where the hell's Zenoba? He's just running off somewhere. The concept of being careful was probably lost on him. Not surprising, because if he fell off a cliff, he'd probably come out unscathed. Do you see something? He climbed up after him. At some point, the edge of the slope abruptly dropped off to a sheer cliff. Reese's eyes widened in surprise at what lay beyond them. Oh! This is amazing. So this is what the cities look like here. Cliff's voice was full of wonder. This was no ordinary cliff that we're standing on. Don't stand on cliff. I'm sorry, I had to make the joke eventually. One of these times I had to make the cliff joke, all right? Don't stand on cliff. This is no ordinary cliff that we're standing on. It was a physical cliff, not a cliff. It was an enormous one. A whole city sprawled below them, nestled inside a crater. In the middle were ruins of an iron castle. It's already like clicking right there. Rias mumbled to himself, wait, so this is where he thinks he is? Rias knew the city, crater acting like a natural protection, preventing creatures from invading. At night, the magic stones embedded in the inner walls would light up. Rias also knew the origins of the castle, once headquarters of the demon world's greatest emperor, Kishirika Kishirisu. The place was badly damaged in the conflict during the Laplace's War. It was now known as the Old Kishirika Castle. This city, Rikarisu, had left Rudius with nothing but bad memories the last time he was here. And that is chapter 5. Yeah, I kind of my assumption was that they were going to end up probably at, around Megurdia. I kind of assumed this would be a good way for just an excuse to have Rudius run back into the parents and explain the whole situation with Roxy, but this makes the most sense. Going to the biggest city, the biggest location, and yes, technically the place that does technically still have Kishirika's castle. And I kind of assume that there's a possibility that Kishirika still goes there and hangs out, though it does kind of imply the idea the castle is beat up. Actually, what I was assuming was going to happen here was when he was there, what my mind was starting to draw a picture of was this idea of him possibly being in the castle. Like, they teleported into the castle, and they came out to a cliff, and then they seen out somewhere, but it would be way too difficult for them to see a horizon or to not see the city below them unless there was like another lip to it. My assumption is there might be another lip underneath the castle that they had to climb up to in order to see the village below them, but yeah, it is kind of interesting to note that there's like this, on one of these big archways that are climbing up around this crater, there's like this little spot where there's a chamber where there was a teleportation there that all these dudes got sealed inside of. But yeah, I'm, again, super excited. Now, it is curious to have him state that at the end, that this place left him but nothing but bad memories last time he was there. Which, yes, does technically imply the idea of probably everything that happened when they went to leave. They went out, they did this quest, they came back, Nokopara kind of brought up this whole situation, and then Rajerd had to wash his hair out, and then everybody started panicking, including people that, he had helped. And so it was like that terrible, he basically just had a very terrible last impression, which is this idea that we did all this stuff to try to help the name of Rajerd, help the name of the Superds, and yet still, everybody, despite knowing that he helped them specifically, again, those Kurt and all them, he helped them, saved his life. They even panicked. It's this sad realization that Rudius had that all that work meant nothing. And it wasn't a good experience. And yes, he was technically at that time being blackmailed by Nokopara. Nothing about that ending point experience was good. But it is odd for him to say that because they had a lot of fun in there. They did a lot of cool things in there. They did a lot of quests and everything. They were building up money. They did a bunch of silly things, like the introduction of Dead End and everything. It's not like all the memories would be bad, but again, recalling a lot of those are going to technically bring up Edis, and that could be a bad feeling. And bringing up a lot of memories in there is going to remind him of Rajerd, and how he's not with Rajerd anymore, and how Rajerd was discriminated against. It technically does make sense that a lot of these memories are just going to bring up the negative sides of it all. But yeah, pumped. I cannot wait for them to be reunited with Kishirika. It's going to be a lot of fun. I cannot wait for it. So yeah, of course, I'm going to leave it off there. I haven't even started into chapter 6 yet, and this has been going on for a long enough that we got a nice juicy segment of chapters to go through for Mushoku Monday. So greatly appreciate you guys for dropping by as usual. A lot of fun as always, and it was a good set of chapters here. Got a little emotional with chapter 4, which I guess is a good thing that I didn't do it last week, because that would left me exhausted then as well. But greatly appreciate you guys. I got to get out of here too, because literally in 20 minutes, Mushoku Monday starts for me, because I record this typically on Mushoku Monday day. But I greatly appreciate you guys' support as always. Thanks to everybody that dropped by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Make sure to hit that like button before you guys leave. I greatly appreciate all of you guys' kind words and support. It's just really fantastic. And yes, as usual, thanks so much to everybody that supports monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships. All that stuff means a great deal to me. Definitely appreciate you guys. And as always, until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care. Once the headquarters of the demon's world greatest emperor, Kishirika, once the headquarters of the demon's world,
Oh, this is amazing. So, this is what oh,
that's Cliff. I'm just so excited to say Sonoma's voice. I don't know. Thinking that it was safe as the other continents. Thinking that it was as safe as Central, or there was a great tortoise far off in the heart. There was a great tortoise far off in the heart. There's a great tortoise off in the far. It was a great tortoise far off in the heart. It was a great, or so he thought. Until he know, and still, or so he thought. He wondered if the dead could think. He wondered what the dead thought. He wondered if Cliff groaned as the light illuminated bleached white bones. Cliff groaned as the light illuminated bleached white balloon. Maybe he had already returned to the. Specifically, a parent needs to be with Susan. Access to them would he knew their name or her name for so long. He knew that in any case, I doubt that he would. I don't have my freaking Orsted Pedagogue's voice right now. Still, perhaps he could do something.
It's not something that Yuruzu can cure. It's not something that Yuruzu
had left Rudius with nothing but bad memories. The last time he had left Rudius with nothing. One more line.